Dave, have you rented your tux for next week's NCS Festival, the Reuben Awards?
My tuxedo. No, I have not actually gone yet. It is a black tie affair, and I need a tux, but I have not yet gone to rent one.
So I went and I rented mine yesterday. I went and got measured and everything, and I felt like I was going to the prom all over again. You had, and he goes, well, what kind of tux would you like? And I said, listen, here's what I know. It's a black tie affair. I've got to dress and up and be nice and everything, but I'll be honest with you, I really don't care. It's got to be a black suit. It's got to have lapels. I've got to have a bow tie. That's really all I'm looking for here. He goes, we deal with this all the time. Walk right this way. I know exactly what you need. And he did. He went over and literally they have like the standard generic tuxedos right there. They've got a rack full of them. He measured me, and I've got to go pick it up just before I leave for the show next week.
I would love it if they have different models. There's one called like the Classico. There's one called like the Debonair. And then there's one called, it's just a big sign that just says the one for guys that don't really care. And it's a huge rack. It's really long, you know.
That's the one that I want. Yeah. Right there is the one that for somebody who doesn't care. He goes, would you like it in a color? Would you like navy blue or something like that? I'm like, no, I'm not a 17-year-old going to his first prom. I just want to, I actually don't want to stand out. I just want to be dressed however I need to be to attend this black tie affair.
Yeah. What's funny, though, is going to get a tux or any kind of suit fitting, you immediately flash back to being 11 and being at like Sears Roebuck, standing on the box, and your mom going, do they fit? How do they fit?
Yes.
How do they fit around your rump? Are they okay? And you're like, yeah, Mom, they're fine.
And you don't know how to answer. Like, yeah, they fit. They're not falling off. You know, could they be tighter? Yeah, I guess they could be tighter. Could they be looser? Yeah, I guess they could be looser. What are you asking me these questions for?
Yeah, you know what? I'm 11. I don't know. But what's funny is I actually, because, pre-pandemic, I actually went and bought a tux because my wife had enough of these Hollywood events where it's like, hey, we're going to the Emmys, put on a tux. I don't want to rent another tux. It's, whatever it is, $60, $70. I'm just going to buy one. So and this is an honest to God truth, Brad, down by the border in San Diego, the border of San Diego and Tijuana, there's a suit place that says 2 suits for $200. $200.
Oh my God.
I got a tux for $100, right?
Hell, you'd be dumb not to.
Right, so, then flash forward to every event I would go to where other actor friends would have, because they get fitted by professionals, and usually like the company itself will subsidize the suit because they want the handsome actor to be wearing that tux.
Right.
So I would ask a friend, like, hey, what are you wearing? Hugo Boss. And they'd be like, what are you wearing? And I said, $99 suit from two suits for $200.
I'm wearing 2 for $200, baby.
I got 2 for $200. And on that note, I'm going to say hello, everybody, and welcome to Comic Lab, the show about wearing perfectly tailored $99 suits and making comics.
And just renting it and planning on throwing it back at them after it's done and making a living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, editor of webcomics.com and the cartoonist of Evil Inc.
And I'm his pal Dave Kellett, cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and co-director of the documentary Stripped.
And this week's hour of comics advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. I'm excited to see you next week at the Reubens, where Brad and I and Phil Folio are all 3 nominated for what are we nominated for? Long form, right?
Best long form online comic.
I actually forgot what we were nominated for. I mean, it actually speaks to the fact that how wonderful it is and how nice and chuffed we feel to be nominated. But at the end of the day, we're old enough now to know that they don't really matter. And win or lose, the next day you got to do a comic. So, it's all well and good. But so, Brad, we got a whole big show to jump in on to this week, and let's dive right in, my friend.
Absolutely. And we've got the first question coming in from one of our Patreon community members, Cosmo, and it goes like this. It's sometimes the short and sweet questions are the best. Listen how this gets right down to the heart of things. Is it worth splitting my time learning how to write and draw comics, or just focusing on one? So here's a person. He's like, hey, I want to learn how to be a cartoonist. I want to learn this thing. Should I learn how to draw and write, or should I just focus on one?
This is interesting because this question to me sounds like they are at the very, very beginning. They're taking that first step out the door. Mm-hmm. And the question is, boy, it's so basic that it's almost foreign to me and I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
Like, if you have the chance in life to draw what you write, and you have the chance to write what you want to draw.
Yeah.
To me, what a magical kind of storytelling you can do as a cartoonist, where you are wearing all the hats, because you are the writer, you're the director, you're the stage manager, you're the casting agent, you're the costumer, you're the actor, you're the DP. I mean, it's such a wonderfully encompassing career to be able to do both, that to me, my first blush answer to this is it almost seems foreign to pick one or the other when you could start the journey by trying to do both.
Yeah. And I'll go, even if we're talking about existential crises, I'll even go deeper on it. And that is this: a comic or a cartoon is the combination of an illustration and writing. That's what a comic is. At the heart of it, it's an illustration that pairs words and pictures to do a certain amount of storytelling. Right? That's existential. That's what a comic is. Right. If you want to be a cartoonist, by definition, you need to learn to write and draw. It's like saying, can I be a trumpet player, but I only want to blow into the mouthpiece. I don't want to learn the fingering, or vice versa. I want to learn how those three valves work, but I don't want to learn how to blow into the mouthpiece.
Can I hire someone to blow for me?
Exactly. And it's like, no, if you want to play the trumpet, you have to learn all aspects of that instrument. And by the way, I know that I'm leaving out an entire section of creators who collaborate to do comics, right? And some people are writers, and they are comics writers, and they collaborate with an artist to create a comic, and they're valid and wonderful, and that's a fantastic thing. I'm not discounting that at all. And at the same time, there are people who realize that writing just isn't their thing, but they're very good at drawing, and they collaborate with somebody. And if that's what you want to do, then be honest with yourself about that and say, I'm just going to learn one half of this, but I'm going to have to find a collaborator, and that's going to be a part of how I pursue this long term. So I guess the question that I'm going to answer your question with a question, and that is, do you want to be a cartoonist, or do you want to be a comics writer, or do you want to be a comics artist? Those are three options that are available to you. And your answer to that is my answer to you as to what you need to learn.
Well, let me ask you this, Brad, because my intuition because it's not the first time that someone's asked us a question akin to this, right?
Right.
Whenever someone asks us this type of question, usually, not always, but usually what this tells us is, they are an artist, or they're artistically inclined, or they're drawing inclined, I guess I should say. And what they're hearing from us over the course of the show and from the industry is, well, you got to do both. And I think a little bit, most of the time, these people tend to be asking, hey, do I really have to learn writing, or can I just stick to my lane as an artist? Right?
Yeah.
Because if they're naturally a writing inclined person, the world is open to them. They could write novels, novellas, plays, TV, poetry, comics, right? But usually if someone is asking this specific question, I bet you they are coming from an artist or a drawing focused background, right? Where that's their strength right now. That's where they're inclined. And they're saying, I want to do comics, but guys, do I have to learn how to write? Is that something I have to do?
I'm actually glad that you brought that topic up, Dave, because it's something that hovers in the back of my mind when I hear a question like this. And that is, we harp on writing a lot on this show because we realize that a lot of people come to comics because they're artists, and they're struggling because their writing is suffering. They don't realize that they need to pay much more attention to writing, and they devalue it as such, right? They're not spending a lot of time going deep on their writing. And so we say, you need to learn how to write. You need to learn how to write. And as a result, I think sometimes the message is, well, you don't need, they keep saying you need to learn how to write. They don't talk about you need how to draw. Maybe it's not that important. And with all misunderstandings, there's an element of truth to that, because it is true, especially in humor comics, that and we always point to XKCD, but there are other examples where the writing is very, very strong. And that's a big part of it. You can't gloss over that. The writing is very, very strong. And therefore, the art, it doesn't have to be as strong.
Another famous example would be Callahan, a quadriplegic who drew with his mouth,
Yes.
But the writing was so damn funny, and it carried the day,
And so that's all part of it. And that's something that we've talked about a lot. But that doesn't mean that the art is unimportant.
Right.
And again, it comes back to this question of, what do you want to do? Where are your strengths? Where are the places you need to get stronger? And that's how you answer that question. Do you need to learn how to write or draw? Chances are, Dave, if we're both correct about our guess about where this person is coming from, they're probably at the very, very beginning of their journey. Mm-hmm. And the answer is they're probably going to have to learn how to do both.
Yeah, for a couple reasons. Because one, even if in time and tide you decide to just focus on writing or just focus on art, I will be honest that you will hugely benefit from having done both, because I see the fault in many of my friends who just write for comics. That they frankly overwrite for comics. Mm-hmm. It is too much dialogue, too many narration boxes. Because when you have a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. And when you are a writer and are trying to communicate, every problem looks like a problem that could be fixed by more words. So I won't name names, but friends of mine who write comics solely tend to overwrite. And the converse is true. Friends of mine who just draw comics, they don't write them, tend to try to make every page look like Mobius because you just got to fit in more detail. Whereas some pages require a Schultz-like clarity and simplicity, an iconicity, right? But they don't allow that for themselves because they're focused just on making every drawing as powerful as they can. You know what I'm saying? So what I'm getting at here is that there's a fault for not having done both, and a benefit for having done both for people that end up going one path or the other, right? And so that's my first path of advice. And my second path of advice for this is, if you're just starting out, Brad and I often say two things should be the guideposts for an independent cartoonist that's trying to make a career online. One is that you've got to make your own magic, meaning you don't wait for a publisher, you don't wait for an agent, you don't wait for some sort of magical queen to tap you on both shoulders with a sword and say, now you are a cartoonist, right? You're making your own magic. And the second thing that we always advise is you need to own and control your own career and own and control your own output. And for both of those, the better way to do it is to be able to supply all your words and to be able to supply all your pictures. Because as soon as you need to rope in a writer or need to rope in an artist, you're dependent on somebody else, even with all the best of intentions. If I was dependent on Brad, if Brad didn't want to do it anymore, I'm shit out of luck, So I don't technically own and control my own future because I'm now dependent on Brad, who is his own creature and might, choose against it.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because this is something, I don't know whether we even discussed it as it was happening or after it happened. That was a discussion that came up while I was at your booth at San Diego Comic-Con this past year.
Oh, yeah?
And somebody was coming up, and I forget whether he was a writer or an artist. I think he was a writer. And he says, my problem is finding people to collaborate with. Because he goes, okay, I've got this script. I've got it written out. Now, to bring somebody on and ask them to collaborate with me, I've got to take one of two choices. I've got to ask them to accept no payment up front and to promise them a bigger cut of the profits at the end, right? Or to give them partial ownership, or any of the other ways that permutation is going to come out, right? And that's all well and good, except the person almost inevitably flakes out after one or two pages of doing work and not
Right.
getting paid with the hope
Right.
of getting paid down the line. And then you've got to find somebody else, or you've got to restart, or so on and so forth. He says that's option number two. He goes, that's option number one. Option number two is I pay them up front with money that I don't have. Right. How are you going to kickstart something that hasn't even made it past the script stage? And if you're not independently wealthy, if you don't have that already lined up to go, then how the heck are you going to pay somebody a fair page rate, or frankly, even an unfair page rate, if you've got no money up front? That's your two choices. If you are either just a writer or just an artist, that's your two choices. And neither one of those is good. And I'll be honest with you, Dave, I feel very confident in offering an answer to just about any question that comes in on the show, right? Mm-hmm. I'll either give you a definitive answer, or I'll give you some thoughts that will lead you to an answer. After doing this for 20 some years, there's very little I haven't thought about, considered, I haven't heard about somebody else who solved this problem. I'm very confident. Whether I'm right or wrong is another question, but I'm very confident in answering questions. I did not have an answer for this guy.
Well, this goes back to what I was saying before about making your own magic. When you have the ability, no matter what your stage in your journey, when you have the ability to write and draw your own stories, what you have is the ability to put in sweat equity into a project that might not have any funding yet, might not have any audience yet, might not have either one for years to come. But you, nights and weekends, you come home from work, you come home from school, whatever you are in whatever stage of life you're in, you can put in the sweat equity to make sure this thing happens. And because it's just you will ensure that it gets finished and that it continues to build, right? But in this person's case, they either have to hire someone with money they do or don't have. In either case, it's cash going out the door, regardless of how you want to look at it. Or they have to make promises. Future them has to make promises of potential future earnings or potential future payment upon XYZ happening, right? Mm-hmm. And you can intuit how much easier it is to be able to put in sweat equity onto a project versus having to beg, borrow, and steal to make something happen, which is what we're doing. We're making something out of nothing, right? In our storytelling, in our comics. Yeah. And how much easier to do it with sweat equity than do it with money that you do or don't have, or promises that you do or don't have.
And unfortunately, there's no easy answer. For example, a few years ago, we haven't gotten one of these questions in quite a while, but a few years ago, we had gotten a lot of questions in a row about using like 3D software to do comics, right? Where you could put a person, a photorealistic person into a photorealistic environment and do a comic that way by setting up these scenes. And our answer was, yes, you can, but you still have to learn the art side of comics, because all you got to do is look at the wide swath of comics that are done this way to see people who don't understand composition, don't understand lettering, don't understand any of the visual aspects of doing this. They're so confident in the fact that this is photorealistic, therefore it must be right, that they don't realize that there's a difference between a wide shot and a low shot and a high shot, and how you've composed that scene, and whether you've crammed that image with so much detail that it's imperceptible anymore. If you're looking for an easy answer, even if you go to that software that lets you do a very, very realistic image, you still have to learn how to compose those images well, or else really nobody's going to read your stuff.
Yeah. This is kind of a shitty comparison, but it's a little bit like real estate photography. And I'll tell you what I mean. A good realtor hires a photographer that knows composition, knows lighting, knows times of day, knows spatial awareness, knows how to get depth of field. Like you'll see this both in rentals and in someone who's selling a property, but they're doing the listing themselves, and they took the photo on their iPhone 12 or whatever it was, right? And yes, it's an image, and yes, it's realistic, but the lighting is wrong. The composition is weird. The depth of field is off. You know what I mean? All of the things so yes, you can make a comic using these realistic posable things, but you still need to know all the art behind how a comic gets made.
Right.
And yeah, I agree with you. Another thing we should talk about, because I don't think it's mentioned enough publicly, is should you decide to go the writing route, should you decide to go the art route, Brad, in traditional comics, which has the higher page rate?
In traditional comics, which has the higher page rate, a writer or an artist? You know what? You caught me. I don't know. What is the answer to that question?
Oh, I was going to say, and you can tell me if I'm wrong here. I was going to say, and I think I'm right about this, that unless it's a superstar writer, I would say that usually the page rate for an artist is considerably higher than the page rate for a writer. Is what I was going to say. I'm prepared to be wrong about that, but I'm fairly certain that's the case. So it's just something to be aware of, because you can be more prolific as a writer. It's much easier to write. And the entire Roman army crested the hill as the dragon blew its flames against the nuclear weapon that had been exposed to, to second century Rome. And so it's easy. It took me, what is that, 15 seconds to say that? Right. It could take me the better part of a day to draw that. So
of course.
So you can be more prolific as a writer, but usually your page rate is less than an artist for whom the work is less prolific, but the page rates are higher.
Yeah. So I think when it comes down to is which is better to spend your time doing. First, I think we go back to, well, it depends on what you want to do. Mm-hmm. It depends on what your own personal priorities are. And then it comes down to what's realistic for you, right? It comes down to you could be a person for whom you know darn well that you're just never going to be an artist. Right. And listen, art is a mechanical process. It's a skill. It's a sport like anything else. The more you do it, the better you can get at it. But there are some people that just don't have that in them. Right. And they know it. Right. I'm never going to be an illustrator. And if that's the case, if that's you, then you've got to focus on the writing and look forward to a career full of collaborations vice versa. You might be an artist that when we're talking about narrative concepts and we're talking about storytelling, you think that your jokes are great, but they're getting absolutely no traction on social media. You're getting crickets every time that you're unleashing this stuff. You're telling stories, but nobody's interested in the stories that you're telling. You're banging your head against the wall and you just don't understand the difference between your stuff and somebody else's stuff that's getting traction. And of course, the first thing to do there is to blame the algorithm. But let's get beyond that. Let's go to the real truth there. Maybe you are somebody for whom the writing part is never going to make sense, right? Then you also have to be realistic about where you're going to be, right? The answer is what are your priorities? What are your dreams? And what's realistic? And the answer among all those three things is where you should be putting your time in terms of learning. Right.
And some of that distinction is there is a difference between what you want and like to read and what you are able to do. And sometimes only time can show you what you're able to do. I will never be a fashion designer, both because I am colorblind and also because, frankly, I just don't have the oomph to care. I'd rather live in a Steve Jobs world where I wear the same black shirt every day and focus on my creative output than focus on fashion. What I'm getting at is you might be the person for whom the intricacies of drawing are just, you could kind of care less. Like you get it, you see why it's important, but it's not central to you, like Brad was saying. Or vice versa with writing and plot and character and story arcs and all that sort of stuff. Just not where you want to be. But you love comics. You love the finished product. So there's nothing at all wrong with wanting to just write comics or just draw comics. Nothing wrong at all with that. And if that's the path that's for you, you'll know it in your heart as you explore one or the other. I will say this as my own final sign off on it. God, there is a joy to writing and drawing comics. There is an absolute joy to it. So if you're fresh to the process and you got a decade ahead of you, either way you go, writing, drawing, or drawing, I just want to say as a friend, what an incredible art form comics are, to be able to swim in those waters where you can write what you want to write, draw what you want to draw, marry the two together to have self-editorializing pictures. It's a wonderful life, and I can't recommend it enough. Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we've recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on Comic Lab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics. Well, Brad, we got a little bit of an update this week, and it's actually, it's less of an update and more of a warning for those we might be able to help, and also a little bit of corporate complaint in terms of a service that we have loved that has somewhat fallen into hard times, right? It's a much... Okay, so the app that I wanted to talk about today as an update is Dropbox, which I have used for the better part of a decade and loved. It has been a tremendous value in terms of taking, without any extra trouble, any extra thought, taking every file that I create, putting a backup on the cloud, and then in more recent years, having this ability to store things solely on the cloud so they're not clogging up my hard drive. And then at any time that I need them, I can almost dreamfully click and they're right there. They're ready for me. They're right. It's sort of this weird syncing technology that they came up with. But here's the update for this week. When Apple updated to Ventura OS 13, right?
Yes.
Something changed about the way that Ventura allows syncing, or allows the permissions of syncing, more likely, where Dropbox suddenly doesn't have this ability to sync seamlessly from the cloud, from your hard drive, from the hard drive to the cloud. So I wanted to give an update to everyone listening that if you are on a Mac and you're on OS 12 or lower, and you use Dropbox, and you're happy with how you use Dropbox, now is not the time to update to OS 13, because it's also been months of this not working. Like, I don't know, maybe 6 months, 7 months of it not working. Way
too long.
And it drives me bonkers every time I need to pull up a file. It drives me bonkers with files that are linked within files. Like if I'm doing Illustrator or InDesign and there's an image file that's linked inside the file. Oh my God, it drives me bonkers. I mean, am I alone in this, Brad? Have you experienced this?
No, Dropbox is really dropping the ball badly. Badly. They were an industry leader. Nobody could touch them. And it was that way for years. And over this past year or so, they've really failed at doing what they consider to be their core strength, and that is backing up files so that you can easily access them. Right. The whole reason of using Dropbox. I'm at the point now, Dave, where I'm really kind of hoping somebody like their number 2 competitor steps it up and gives them some serious competition. Because as somebody who's been a Dropbox user for probably more than 10 years, I would ditch them right now in a heartbeat. Because let's face it, the OS 13 has been out for a long time now. Right. It's time for their software to work with the most recent version of Mac. And the fact that they can't do that really makes me scared of where Dropbox as a company is headed. So I'm very much anxious to see somebody step up their game, because let's face it, for many years nobody bothered to try to compete with Dropbox because they were the 800-pound gorilla. They're absolutely failing right now, and I'm eager to see somebody step up and take their place.
Yeah, and I'm sure there will be someone among our listenership who will write in saying, "Oh, guys, the reason why this is happening is blankety blank," and we'll be like, "Oh, all right." But the simple truth is, it's not just that it's not working. It's not just that it's been 6 to 7 months of it not working. Right. I have found that the communication about when to expect it to work again, why it's not working, what they're doing to fix it is, I don't know. It's just, you're sort of in the wilderness and like, well, I guess this is the new normal for Dropbox, is the way I felt about it. All I can communicate is the way I felt as a consumer. So the main update that I wanted to say is, if you're not on OS 13 and you use Dropbox, maybe don't update just yet. until you get wind through the grapevine that this wind through the grapevine. What is that? That's a weird combination of until you get wind of the fact that Dropbox has fixed this problem. I would recommend not updating.
Absolutely. And we've got another update that I'm kind of extra super excited about, and it has to do with Tales from the Drive, Dave.
Oh, I'm familiar. Yes.
So so this is something that actually started quite a while ago. Dave asked me to write a story for Tales from the Drive, and I was only too happy to do it. And Dave actually gave me kind of a challenge. He says, what I'd really like to do is to have kind of a meet cute, have a romantic story for Tales from the Drive. Because that's something that Tales or Drive doesn't necessarily delve into. There's not a whole lot of romance. There's a lot of comedy. There's a lot of really, really tight sci-fi writing. There's lots to be had there, but not a lot of smooching happening over there.
No.
And I was only too excited to take on that challenge. And I wrote a story that I'm very excited to see your audience respond to. And to make things even better, you got Danielle Corsetto to illustrate this short story. And having seen Danielle's work, being familiar with Danielle for a long time, but seeing the work she turned in, particularly on this project, I cannot wait for your audience to see this stuff.
Yeah, it's been one of my great joys to be able to hire writers or artists or writers and artists to create basically short stories that are set in the Drive universe. And this is a thing that I learned from Dark Horse Comics that used to do those Star Wars standalones, because I always thought it was a fun, essentially no risk way to expand the universe. Like, why not? How fun. People can write for side characters, background characters, weird arcs that never got explored. In this case, things that I don't do well, like meet cutes and romance, which I just do not write. And Brad writes so wonderfully. So how great to have him come in. And I want to share this moment because I think it's just fun to get this insight into it. So in emailing one time with Watterson about Tales of the Drive, Brad, he said, why do you do this? Why do you let people write short stories? And because I'm such a different artist than him in the sense that I love the idea of inviting talented artists like Brad and Danielle into the sandbox, saying, here are all the playthings, do with them what you will, and let's see what comes of it. And if they're having fun with it, and if you give them within reason carte blanche, so you get these amazing stories that you never would have thought to do as an artist yourself. So I am so touched and honored that Brad and Danielle brought their time and talents to Drive. Yeah. And their story is amazing, and it looks amazing. It reads amazing. It is fun and charming and heartwarming. And I hope in the weeks ahead you will check it out. It's labeled as the Tales of the Drive, not Drive, on the Drive website, and it is a dang delight.
Absolutely, and I'm looking forward to seeing how everybody reacts to it. I'm very happy, and Danielle's art is spectacular. So, Dave, let's go back to answering questions, and we've got one that comes in from one of our Comic Lab community members, and it goes like this. Over the last 10 years, I have amassed a large social media following. And he goes on to give numbers, and just to flip the cards ahead, they're very good numbers. Until listening to this podcast, I never realized the importance of having a website to make money. I simply relied on my fan base to show up at local conventions and fairs, which I do pretty well at. I'm about to launch my website on DreamHost in the next week. What is your advice on driving my social media following to my new website and turning them into sales? I love the show and have learned so much from it. Thanks for taking the time to share your experience. So, Dave, he's got very good social media numbers. Every one of them is commendable. He's starting a website. How does he drive that social media traffic to the website?
Okay, so I'm not trying to be facetious or jokey here, because this might sound sarcastic, but I mean, is this answer far easier than I think it is, in the sense that if you have people on social media and you want to drive them to the website, it's not like you're creating a new widget. You're just saying in fun, creative, interesting, enervating ways, hey, go to my website, right?
Yeah.
I mean, isn't it that simple? I mean, or am I wrong? Am I missing something?
This is absolutely a time that you don't want to overthink it. Okay, this is it because it's literally as easy as giving them different excuses to go to the website. The one thing you want to be careful of, because it's a mistake that people make all the time. You don't want to say, now that I've got a website, you've got to go to the website to read the comic, right? That's something that I advise very strongly against. If you want to build an audience, you want to give them that whole comic in the social media post so they can read it without going anywhere, without clicking, right?
Right.
That's the only thing I'm going to tell you to avoid. Now, aside from that, there's and go back a few shows. We had a show, Dave, that was called "I've Got a Website Now. What do I do with it?" Right. Remember that? And it was like he said, basically, I got a website now. What do I do with it? And we said, there's 1,000 things you can do with it. And here's some things that are boilerplate. And then the rest has to do with what your comic is and what your comic is like and what you have and what you can build, right? Go back and listen to that show. And then to connect the dots, all you've got to do then is find fun and exciting ways to talk about that on social media and say with a link, now here it is, right?
Yep.
And I'll give you an example. You could have a guide to the backstory of your comic, which, by the way, Dave does very well at Drive. We can kind of continue the Drive thread throughout this conversation.
I love this. Let's do this for the rest of the show. Yes.
Yeah. And Dave does a great job of this, of giving you a little page on his website that has, it's a new reader page. Here's the story. Here's all the characters, right? Now, on social media, you could take one post every week or so and say, here's some more information about my character, Fred. And for the rest, click here, right? You've got art, you've got writing, you've got a link. Here's the backstory of my comic. To learn more, click here. You can, there's one example. And it all leads into the 4 C's of social media that we're talking about all the time. This is just different ways that you can share your content with folks, and not in a way that is punitive. You can't read it unless you click. You say, here's a taste. For more, go here. Right. Now, go back to all of the 100 things. It felt like there was 100, all the many, many things that we shared on that. I have a website. Now, what do I do with it? And each one of those things is something that you can talk about on social media and then point to your website, including having ebooks for sale, having ebooks that free stuff that they can read, all this other stuff. The only part that I'm having that I want to warn you against is you say you want to direct the traffic to social media, from social media to your website so that you can make sales. The sales are going to happen. I want you to pump the brakes on so I can make sales, because that's a great way to kind of lose focus. When you get them to the website, there should be a lot of house ads there and a lot of outreach that are sales oriented, right? If you take a look at my site, a lot of it's at the top on a big slider and on a column that goes down the left-hand side that has ebooks and books that you can buy on Amazon and so on and so forth. All that stuff is going to be there. And the stuff that I send you towards, like, hey, here's what I've been doing lately, especially with some of the new social media, Dave, on Threads. I'll take an old comic from 3 storylines back, and I'll say, hey, here's a time when Lightning Lady was falling in love with a Minotaur, right? And you can read from the beginning of this storyline, and then I put the link. So you've got the whole comic there, a little introduction to the storyline, and a link. When they go there, when they go to the website, there's going to be plenty of outreach about what I'm doing on Patreon, about how to buy an ebook, how to buy a book on Amazon, all that other stuff. The sales are going to come naturally as you continue to make this person more and more interested in what you're doing as a cartoonist, more and more interested in your comic. Those sales are going to come. I don't want you to focus too much on the sales, other than every now and again, maybe every other week, when you just come right out and say on social media, hey, you can buy this ebook on my website, or you can buy this ebook here or there, whatever. That's a part of those 4 C's too. But don't think that all of your social media outreach, when it has to do with your website, has to be sales oriented. If your website is set up properly, those sales are going to be offered when they go for the other thing you're pointing them to.
Yeah. And I think there's 2 considerations there. Is that one is you can absolutely use all 4 C's of social media to point someone to your website. You can use content, new content, old content, storyline beginnings, storyline key points, character backgrounds, extras that appear only on the website. All that is content, right? You can tell people, hey, go to the site to get more of this. You can say curation. Say, hey, I've picked my 10 favorite comics, or hey, I put a list together of 10 comics you should check out online, and they're on my website, right? That's curation. Yeah. You can use a commercial. That's very clear. That's just like, hey, do you like everything that you're seeing here? There's thousands of comics in the archive, or there's hundreds of comics on this specific theme, or hey, there's a whole bunch of stuff for this character on my site. And then kindness. You just make it so that it's easy to go because they want more of you. There's warm, there's welcoming. The comics and everything about your communication and social media is telling them they want more of you in their life, and the website is the way to do it, right? So you can use all 4 C's to do that. But I will say that if you're doing all of that, like Brad said, to get more sales, I will be honest that you are 3 to 4 clicks away from completing a purchase if you direct someone just to the website.
Yeah.
If you really want more sales, you have to be specific, and you have to have it messaged and themed to the thing you want to sell with a compelling reason why that's, you know what I mean? Like the link has to be direct is what I'm getting at. You can't be like, hey, I'm so glad you like the comic. And if you'd like to buy something, hey, there's something on the website. Like you got to tell people. And frankly, you got to tell them a couple times over the course of a week that something is available for sale, and hey, you should get it, and here's the reasons why you should get it, and here's the reason why it's a good value at the price it's at. So that's just the distinction I would make. And it's not that different from what Brad was saying. It's just like, if you want to make a sale, sometimes you got to clunk people over the head with, hey, this thing is available for sale.
Yeah, absolutely. But I will take a moment just to kind of point out here, it's a good, we want to commend you on making a good decision for starting this website, right? This is the first step of owning and controlling your own work, and good for you for taking over and getting this done. Now, as you're doing that, don't forget some of the basics too, right? Your website, now that you have a website, should be either the top link that you put in your social media bio, or it should be at the top of the link tree that you're linking to from your bio, right? This is one of the most important things that you're going to be doing. And this is an easy part to slip through the crack. In fact, I can't tell you how many times, Dave, I've gone back and looked at my profile on any given social media and seeing stuff that I changed a month ago and I forgot to change back, or right? It's just like it's something that is like, oh my God, I'm missing so much between the profile links and between the pinned post. I'm missing so many opportunities, because all the stuff that we do on social media, one of the natural outcomes is that somebody gets interested in and the first thing they do is they click on your profile to see more about you. And that's where having your links in order and having your pinned post that's at the top in order really becomes important, to the extent that I'm starting to write it into my monthly calendar when I go through and kind of reset for the month. It's like, okay, I've got to change I've got to change my sliders on my website. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. I got to send this out to certain Patreon tiers. I got to do that. There's a bunch of stuff that I do at the beginning of every month. I'm starting to write that at the as my monthly to-do list, which is go through your main social medias and check your profile page, because I've gotten disappointed in myself so many times that it's outdated, outmoded, or it just completely doesn't matter anymore. Like just recently I had a special offer, and it wasn't until weeks after the special offer deadline, and I went back and looked, and I was still promoting the special offer, right?
Right.
So that's the first thing I want you to really make sure that you start getting into the habit of doing. Now that you've got a website to do all of this, make sure that your website URL and perhaps even your pinned post is pertinent to that website.
Pin post pertinent to the boy. By the way, that was great, Stanley. Like fantastic.
Yes.
With pin post pertinent to your website. All right. So, Brad, I want to jump us into one last thought that I had this week as I'm cartooning. I found on Sunday night that the family had all sort of settled in for their long winter's nap, but I still had energy, and so it was a Sunday night, and I said, you know what? I'm going to go to my drawing desk. I'm going to work. I'm going to get a little bit done. And what I realized is, in terms of owning and controlling your own business, where we are our own boss and we're completely independent, I find tremendous joy in the fact that I can work 7 days a week, but also play 7 days a week, in that I can adjust my days infinitely to what my family and I need emotionally or schedule-wise.
Yeah.
And so even though for me it's stretched out over 7 days, I find that wonderful, because I can get a little bit of work done every day and a little bit of joy-filled family time or a little bit of play every day.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to get your thoughts on that in terms of what I think is a happy life balance, that it's 7 days on, but also 7 days off.
Right. No, I think you're absolutely right. I agree 100%. I want to make sure is at the beginning of the show, we were talking about people hearing things that we never said.
Right.
I want to make sure that we clarify. This is not Dave saying, hey, I love drawing so much that that when I work at drawing, it's not really working. It's playing, right?
Oh, right. Like do the thing you love, and you'll never work a day in your life, right, Brad?
Yeah, which is by the way, complete BS.
Yeah,
That's nobody who's ever lived this life believes that. Because the fact of the matter is that, yes, we do love writing. We do love drawing. But when you're doing it with the pursuit of trying to build a business and make a sustainable career, a lot of the fun drains out of it, and it becomes very serious work. He's not saying that. What he's saying is, this is a life in which he's able to have a certain amount of control, so that, yes, it's true. We both work 7 days a week. There's no doubt about it. And that sounds daunting to a lot of people when we say, yeah, I work Saturdays, I work Sundays. I remember telling my sister-in-law that, and her face dropped. She says, really? You work every day? I'm like, yeah, I work I have to. Yeah. But part of that also means I've got the flexibility in the way Dave said it, to play every day to a certain extent. And another way of saying that is I've got the flexibility to be there for my kids when I need to be there, right? To do certain things that when I was locked into a day job, I couldn't do. Right. And to have the flexibility to do all of those things that I couldn't do otherwise, whether it's something mundane like driving to practice, or something like, hey, they need a chaperone on this class trip. And before I wouldn't have been able to do that. But I've got the flexibility now that I can easily chaperone class trips, because I can adjust my schedule to make sure that all that stuff works out. That's, for me, that's not only playing, but having the flexibility to do those things that bring me joy, like spending time with my family and chaperoning trips and stuff like that. That's a big part of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And what it means is that it means sometimes there are Tuesdays where I work for a half an hour, but then there are Saturdays where I'm working for 6 or 7 hours,
oh, my goodness, yes.
But I guess what I'm trying to say is, unlike the corporate jobs we had in the past, where you would go to an enforced set of time, sit down at a desk, come hell or high water, get these assignments done, and then have these 2 days where you would just collapse on the weekends from the job that you were on an enforced schedule. Yeah. I find this life to be really wonderful, both in the fact that it's infinitely adaptable to what my family needs, and it's also infinitely adaptable to what I need. Because every once in a while, there's a day where it's just like, you know what? I'm going to pick up the slack on the weekend. I need to call an audible on this and just give myself a day to recharge my batteries, to read a book, to absorb a little bit more of the world so that I can write better on a Saturday, maybe. And anyway, long story short is, again, the theme of the show should be, I love cartooning. I love this life where I have this infinitely flexible schedule.
Well, and it's also important that, what you said is really true. We're not locked in to a certain amount of time. Yeah. Right. It's not like we're working a 9-to-5 job. It's not all about you put in a certain amount of time and then you're done.
I see you. I see you. I see what you're doing.
Having said that, we've been recording for about an hour, so it's time for me to say you've been listening to Comic Lab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
We're now like an old married couple where I know all your tricks. And
I know.
There's the tiniest change in your voice, and I feel it in my bones. You're like, well, I'll tell you what. It is like time, and time is out. I'm like, God damn it, here it comes. Oh, I see him setting up the pitch.
I had to really work on not looking at you because as that smile spread across your face, I was having a hard time finishing my sentence.
So I will say, your hosts have been my ever delightful friend, the talented writer of the new Tales of the Drive story coming out right now at drivecomic.com. He's also the editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc. at evilcomic.com.
And my good friend Dave Kellett, whose kindness for letting me do this story goes beyond bounds. I am so excited about this. And he's also the co-director of the comics documentary Stripped and the cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and Drive at drivecomic.com.
The fantastic Comic Lab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode was edited by Matt Woodard of Windsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
If you love Comic Lab, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, and you may hear your review featured on a future episode. And if you're listening to us on Spotify, don't forget to give us a 5-star rating. Keep us right at the top of those podcast charts.
And it takes but a second, friends, so it is a huge help to the show. It takes but a second. And I will say Comic Lab is made possible by your support on patreon.com/Comic Lab. So I will go ahead and say that twice. Patreon.com/Comic Lab. Well, I mean, speaking of old married couples, now I'm wondering if you use that bit at home. You're like, well, this dinner conversation sure has been fun, but I'll tell you what, much like the time that flows through the river. And everyone's like, Dad, you're about to get up from the dinner table. We already know this trick.
Well, actually, that comes from being raised in the Midwest. We have a whole dance for that, where if near the end of the night, if you're sitting with a Midwest couple, at one point somebody is going to slap their leg and go, well. And when you see the leg slap and the well, you know that the night is over. It's actually kind of a beautiful like dance that we go through. Everybody knows what's up. And it's a lot better than me, where I just stand up in the middle of conversation. I say, we're done. Like a blackjack dealer, I just say, we're done. I can't take this anymore.
Showing that you're not carrying any chips away from the table. Yeah.
But Midwest is just the knee slap, the leg slap, and then say, well, and then somebody else always, this is a statute. It's written into the state law. After the leg slap and the well, then somebody else has to say, I guess it's getting to be about that time.